Welcome everybody to Seed Talk 2020. Our next speaker is Seed Variety Use Agreement Pilot Project, and that's Lauren Hadley. He's the Executive Director with the Canadian Plant Technology Agency. Lauren, you can grab the screen now.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All righty. Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm pleased to be with you today to talk to you about the Seed Variety Use Agreement. My presentation will have two parts. One is just a refresher on what the value creation system we're talking about is, what the Seed Variety Use Agreement is, and then we'll go into the final part of it, or the second part, which is just to talk about the Seed Variety Use Agreement pilot program, which has two parts to it, and then I'd be happy to take your questions. First thing I'd like to just refresh people with is this proposal of a Seed Variety Use Agreement is based around three guiding principles. One is that it needs to be of value to Canadian producers. Two is it needs to be transparent. So as a farmer, a commercial farmer, needs to know at the time he purchases his certified seed what his maximum rate that he will pay for using farm-safe seed. And finally, this is about choice. And it's in two ways. One, we don't expect every variety will be under an SVUA. And two, no varieties that are not committed and into the system at first sale of certified can ever be into the system. So it is a Canadian system. What happens here is that a producer does exactly what he always does. He goes to his trusted seed supplier. He purchases certified seed of a variety. At that time, he's presented with a contract electronically, and that contract lays out for him the terms and conditions, which will include what the maximum SVU rate will be. It'll only apply to those varieties where this notice is given at the time of first certified sale, and it will be only on those varieties that were registered after February 25th, 2015. Producers will have their choice then to use farm-safe seed or come back and repurchase certified. And of course, that's subject to whether there's any other contractual agreements or patents. This is similar but not the same as other systems around the world. You'll hear me say that as CPTA and the seed industry, we've been studying this since prior to 2012. Matter of fact, some of us have been in it several years before that. We expect that the variety use fee charge for the use of farm-safe seed is going to be based on the performance of a variety and based on the performance in the producer's field. It's up to the distributor or developer to designate that fee. We don't designate it from the standpoint of CPTA. All we say is that it has to be done prior to the first sale of certified, that they declare a maximum. Little schematic on this that just lays it out very clearly. Again, average farmer wants a particular variety. If it is one that is subject to a seed variety use agreement, he plants it just the same as he always does, plants it certified. In the fall, based on the performance, he'll decide whether he's going to reuse it again. Sometime before planting, we're going to ask him if he's reusing. And then once he's reused, likely in July, we will ask him to declare the amount. And then the system, based on the contractual fee, will invoice him for what he's used. The role of seed growers and retailers doesn't change a whole bunch. Understand this is very similar, and it's kind of based on the system we've been using for midge-tolerant wheat, and that the responsibility of the seed retailer and seed grower in this case is to present the contract for those varieties it's subject to and get the contract signed. In reality, when we did our study of how this works legally, this is likely a step that would have had to be taken under an endpoint royalty model as well. The law in Canada requires us to give notice. So this step is the same, whether we used an endpoint royalty or whether we used an SVUA. We have been quite successful in using web-based contracting programs. The most recent one is the midge tolerance system, which has been well received. It's not perfect by any means, but we continue to adjust it to make it better. Again, this schematic, just to let you know, there are some things that are up for discussion, and I just point to this. There is a possibility with discussions that we may actually include what's known as a verification step. I would say that the journey's still out. I will also tell you that this system that we're talking about is a producer receives one invoice for all of the SVUA varieties, regardless of distributor. So as a commercial farmer, if I'm growing a Secan barley and a Limagren wheat and a FP Genetics pulse variety, I would just get a single invoice for all of those things. So it's single invoice, single audit, single payment, and then CPGA returns that money to the specific breeder that it was collected for. We are talking about a verification system. It was there. It's been talked about. One of the things you'll talk about in the pilot is talking to both seed growers and commercial producers about the pluses and minuses of verifying. So there's some options there that have been given. Those are all up for discussion. And as part of the pilot, we want to talk about these in some detail, get the pluses and minuses from the users of the system. This is we're proposing a very secure system. The reason that we're working on this is we should be aware that even though the seed industry through the CPGA is managing this, we're actually taking responsibility for commercial farmer records. And that means they're not the same as the records we have for members in some ways. These are commercial farmer records, and we have to live up to the requirements under the privacy legislation in Canada and the confidentiality expectations of both producers and retailers. However, we're setting this up in a way that is single point of contact for the commercial producer, single point of contact for the seed grower seller. And using this single system and the membership and confidentiality policies of CPGA allows us to essentially collect the information, keep it sequestered, and only send that information about an FP customer to FP, a Secan customer to Secan. Retailer information remains with the retailer. It's not shared beyond that point. We've been quite successful with using communication support for training. It's our plan to continue with that using web-based training for plant breeders, seed distributors, all those involved. And then, as we said, the invoicing, collection, and enforcement will be handled by CPTA. One of the things that some of you that have heard me talk ad nauseum is that CPTA's principle is known as coaching for compliance and graduated enforcement. And really what this means is that we take every opportunity to remind the producer of his obligations. We use systems to monitor sales and other information to ensure people are living up to it. And then graduated enforcement simply means it depends on how serious the infringement is, what activity you take. So, and the more serious the issue, the more likely you are to go to things like legal action. All of our objectives in enforcement are not to collect money. Our objective is to bring people on side. So we're out to train farmers to change their behavior to match what they committed to. We are committed to having well-trained, agriculturally based third-party auditors to do the audits. It is not up to CPTA to decide what the infringement response is. That's up to the distributors, and each of them have their own internal policies. But in other programs, our standard is about 90% of what we do is cleared up with an email or a phone call. 5% requires the activity that may require a letter from myself or from a lawyer. And then 2 to 3% of the cases are up to 5%. We've actually had to go to civil court. So that's where we sit. There is a website that lays this out. Oops, sorry. There's a website that lays this out. Again, we don't expect farmers to buy these new varieties if they don't see a benefit. We expect and will demand that distributors are transparent in how they price, and they may price in different ways. And we expect this will be about choice. Older varieties will not be in the system. It'll only be something that gets into the system as it's used. Are there any questions? Hearing and seeing nothing, I will move on to the discussion of the pilot program. So just so we're all aware, the formal discussions about value creation and collecting additional money to be focused towards plant breeding in Canada are formally 12 years old. The last 2 years, there have been a lot of debate and discussion, and at times quite emotional discussion. There are questions that need to be answered. So 2008 is when the Grains Council of Canada basically said that they would put through a study, and that study said that we as Canadians are not investing in open pollinated crops like our competitors are. In breeding and development, we're not at the same level. And that puts us at risk of being uncompetitive. 2015 is when UPOB 91, which is the Plant Breeders' Rights Act, which is the vehicle for increased returns to breeders, was ratified in Canada. The reason it's called UPOB 91 is the international treaty was actually ratified in 1991. Canada promised to upgrade our legislation to those standards in 1992, and we finally made it in 2015. The seed industry, through some of our discussions in Seed Synergy and other things, have done various studies on what works and how things benefit producers and what kind of money can be expected and so on, and the benefits. That all culminated with a working group that was established under the Grains Roundtable that met for 2 years. And that working group included seed industry, seed growers, it included producer groups from across Canada and government officials, and it met. Many of you will remember that the working group chaired by Tom Steve and Aaron Armstrong actually traveled across the country in the winters in fall 2016 and winter 2017. They provided a report to the Grains Roundtable. The Grains Roundtable accepted that report. It actually laid out 2 options: an endpoint royalty or a trailing royalty program, which is another way of saying seed variety use agreement. The federal government came out in the fall of 2018 to consult with producers, and again finished up with those consultations in spring 19. Between the 2 principal people doing the presentations from the federal government, Anthony Parker and Carla, they met many groups and received a lot of feedback and a lot of upset, let's be honest. One of the challenges with what's gone on is the seed industry, CPTA, CSTA, and with consultation with others, had selected the seed variety use agreement in the fall of 2017 as what we felt was the best option. What we were challenged with during the consultations was, will it work? How much does it cost? What does it cost to administer? And so that's the reason that we've launched a pilot program. Pilot program is going to take 2 years because you have to go through a full cycle, which is the sale of certified, that contracting system, let the farmer grow it for a year. Then he selects farm safe seed he's going to use. He uses it, and then you get payment from him. So it takes 2 full years. So that's what we're in right now. Producer groups in varying degrees are interested in being part of the system. Some are strongly want to be involved in a positive way, others not so much. So it has 2 parts to it. And these are managed by 2 industry players. The pilot program, which is about the physical contracting, electronic platform, and operational systems. That'll be done by CPTA. And then we're creating under CSTA what's known as an SVUA working group. That working group is being set up. It will include commercial farmers, seed growers, seed trade members, and it'll be focused on asking the group, presenting to the group issues and options, and asking for their input to improve the program as we go along. So the SVUA system I just talked about, it's the platform that we're going to use, which is an electronically web-based system. It's the process, how things get done, and then it's the efficiency of payment distribution. This is all about testing the system. And we expect that test will involve contracting of a number of varieties and a large number. This spring, training of the retailers, training of to a degree of the producers, gathering all that information, keeping it in a secure location electronically, and then come next spring, there'll be the system of asking questions of the commercial producer. Are you going to retain? And then what did you use, and invoicing. A lot of this, as I've said, is based on the midge tolerant system. The front, the midge tolerant system is essentially the front end. What really has to be tested is the things that we're going to do in the middle and back end of the program, and those will be tested extensively next year. But this is a real live situation program. We're actually going to be dealing with real live varieties in the real marketplace, and it should give us good information on what producers want, what they don't want, and how we can move forward. One of the things I should remind you, and I think this is public, but at this time, those breeders that are involved are committed to returning 100% of the SVUA collected to breeding programs. So both organizations that have announced varieties to date, which are CCAN and Cantera, have both committed that they are going to carry the administration cost for this system. And the goal, of course, is to incentivize, get more investment there so that there's more plant varieties developed. So one of the reasons that we, as CPTA, CSTA, thought this is really up to us as the seed industry to talk over with our producers. It's a direct connection that is being facilitated by using the certified seed sale between the breeder and the commercial grower. And it's a direct, we deal with the issues, we explain it. There's no issue in involving a third party like a grain company and trying to explain why this has to happen and what it costs and what responsibilities. We're using all of our traditional, well-proven systems. We're just adding another layer to that discussion. Seed variety working group is being set up by CSTA. I should tell you that there are a number of things in discussions that we've had in the committees, and some of you will have attended a session in Calgary last December. The things that we as the seed industry are concerned about and commercial producers are concerned about are very similar. When you take the principles that were developed at Canadian Federation of Agriculture and Grain Growers of Canada, and you look at what seed people are concerned about, there's a whole bunch of similarity. Some of the things that those organizations are concerned about, plain and simple, are not within the control of the seed industry. They're regulatory issues that governments need to talk about, things like variety deregistration and grain reclassification. Those are not things that the seed industry has control of. We're inputters, just the same as producers. Many of the things that producers are concerned about, we can answer through having a strong, well-designed, well-communicated SVUA system. So the SVUA working group will be set up, we hope, in the next couple of weeks. It will start with the terms of reference, and then we'll be asking that working group questions. We'll also be presenting them with plans as they go forward and asking for their input. And the idea here is to get them to really understand that this is a service that we're providing as a seed industry to commercial producers, to allow commercial producers to make the choice as to directly as to where they want their money for breeding to go. So that's a pretty quick run through. I think that it's important to understand that CSGA and has been deeply involved in this, as well as the rest of the seed industry partners. This is not a surprise. It has been going on, as I said, formally for 12 years. Canada is one of the last countries to move to this type of a system. And so now the time has come for us to move forward, to try it out, to see how it works, and to move on with that discussion. When it comes to discussions about a platform and operation, that's kind of something that I'm heading up at CPTA. When it comes to the coordination of the working group, that's Tyler McCann, the interim executive director of CSTA. So I know that's pretty quick. I'm pretty sure that everybody's been through these presentations before. Happy to have discussion and questions.
Thanks, Lauren. So I'll wait a couple seconds, since I seem to be pretty fast other times, to take over onto the next session. So I'll wait a bit till you guys have some typing time, or you get yourself unmuted. So Lauren, do you want to stop your screen share?
Okay, so I can figure out how to do that. We'll be away. Stop screen share. There we go.
Great.
Just easier for me to take it off and mute. Lauren, just a question for you, and you may not be able to answer it, and that's fine. Just wondering, are you getting, how is the buy-in going to this? Are folks signing up and signing on to these new varieties now, or maybe you're not at liberty to say?
So here's what I can tell you about the general consensus. I prefer not to talk about specific company experiences, but when we have meetings, either myself or people from the seed companies have meetings with commercial producers, we're not getting a tremendous amount of pushback. We're getting a lot of, as long as I get to make the choice, I'm good. So that's what we're seeing. But I'll be honest to tell you that the producer groups are concerned. Many of these producer groups, particularly when you talk about wheat and barley, it looks like, from my own personal analysis, they're spending about 25% of what they collect in checkoffs is being directly spent supporting public breeding programs. So they do have concerns that we have to answer. Producers are concerned about whether or not there is an issue where varieties that don't have the SVUA will no longer be available, either through failure to produce seed or through variety cancellation. CFA does have a variety cancellation process. It is a 3-year process, but we would like more clarity on what triggers it from the standpoint of CFIA. The other one, Jonathan, that you've probably heard some of the Western Canadians talk about is particularly reclassification of how a variety is treated when it comes to grain delivery has been a difficult problem, because that is basically in the hands of the Canadian Grain Commission, and varieties can come on the market in the CWRS class, and then in the future be switched to a different class. And in some notable cases, very good varieties have been switched out of WCRS to other classes and simply put the certified seed sales and the producer use of those varieties plummeted. We would like that to be clarified some more, and I think commercial producers are concerned about it as well. But certainly for the seed industry, that's a huge issue. If you think you're going to be competing in a particular market class and that changes with limited notice, it also can have some pretty serious impacts. So we'll continue to talk. Myself and others are available to make presentations, to talk to producers, to talk to whomever wants to talk about it. We have lots of web resources to lay this out. I would encourage you when you're talking to your producer groups to urge them to participate in the working group. It's their opportunity to get those concerns discussed and worked on. The only other thing, Jonathan, just to finish up, is we are under the strong, almost guarantee that the federal government is not going to consult about value creation anymore at this time. That their process is at an end.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions for Lauren? Oh, go ahead, Mike. You want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, Lauren, I was just wondering, for the platform for reporting, is it going to be identical to the midge tolerant wheat system? I'm just wondering, because I was just working on it here yesterday, actually, and it can be a lot simpler of a system. I mean, it's when it's go time, the last thing that you're going to do is sit there and try and enter it into a system that isn't working at the time. You know, your priorities are going to change pretty quickly. So I think that there is room for improvement on the midge tolerant wheat reporting system. So can you comment if it's going to be the exact same system, or is it going to have improvements?
So the principles will be exactly the same, and the principles are that a producer signs up once. When you when you invoice him, you assign the invoice to the contract, to his central contract. Can it be improved? Absolutely, and that would be part of the system that we want to work on. The idea is to make it as user-friendly and appropriate as possible, and there are some ideas that distributors have talked about to make it more efficient. And over the next year and a bit, we will make it more efficient. For this year, it's going to be very basic, but going forward, the idea is to make it as efficient as we can for the retailers to fulfill their obligations, and rely very heavily on electronic systems. So that's where we plan on being. We know we can't do it for 100% of the people, but if we can do it for 98%, that'll work well. Absolutely. If you have improvements, Mike, send me a note and I'll try and get them put in place.
Excellent. Thanks, Lauren.
Not a problem, man.
Okay. Oh. Seeing no other questions and seeing no other hands up, we will end this session. Thank you very much, Lauren, for helping us today and giving us some more information on the Seed Variety Use Agreement pilot project. We appreciate your input. Oh, Mike, do you have another question? Sorry.
No, I do not.
Okay. I just saw, I guess I hadn't put your hand down yet. Okay, thank you so much again, Lauren, and we will now move to the next.